The punch landed with a sickening crack, knocking 87-year-old Sam Dorsey off the bench and onto the concrete, blood pooling beneath his ear as the town stood frozen. 10 minutes later, a black SUV rolled up and out stepped his son, Major Caleb Dorsey, still in uniform, eyes locked on the man who dared touch his father. He didn't raise his voice, didn't draw a weapon, but from that moment on, everything changed. Under the wide late summer sky of Ashbridge, Alabama, the street in front of Benny's Diner baked under the noon sun. A few pickup trucks sat scattered near the curb windows, cracked radios murmuring country ballads or gospel, depending on the driver. The diner's screen door creaked open and shut every so often, letting out the scent of frying catfish, old coffee, and lemon pie. But the heartbeat of that little town didn't come from inside the diner. It sat just outside on the third plank of a worn wooden bench, back straight, eyes steady, coffee in hand. Samuel Dorsey, 87 years old, still wore his Sunday shoes even on Saturdays. His trousers were neatly pressed, his collared shirt tucked tight, and atop his head sat an old olive green army cap that had seen better decades. His cane rested beside him, upright, planted like a flagpole between his feet. Every Saturday, just like this, rain or shine, Sam Dorsey would take that bench outside Benny's. It wasn't for the food, it was for the watching. He watched the road, he watched the town. And if you sat near him long enough, you might even see him close his eyes and listen to the wind like it was playing back memories only he could hear. Folks in Ashbridge respected him, some out of habit, some out of guilt, most out of admiration. He never asked for much, never told many stories, but everyone knew he'd fought in Korea and Vietnam, took shrapnel to the ribs and a bullet to the thigh, and still walked a mile every morning like time had to catch up to him, not the other way around. He never raised his voice, never cursed, never complained when the waitress brought him regular instead of decaf. He was a fixture like the post office flag or the old water tower that hadn't been painted since Clinton was in office. So when the roar of motorcycles came cutting down Main Street like a rusted blade through butter, the town noticed. Heads turned, conversations stopped mid-sentence, and Sam Dorsey just sipped his coffee. They came in loud, 6 of them, maybe 7 chromes, snarling in the sunlight. Leather vests slapped with crude patches and sunburnt ego. But it wasn't the noise that caught people. It was the flag stitched across the chest of the man in front, a weathered Confederate battle emblem flapping gently against his black vest, like it still thought it had something to prove. His name was Dean Mallory, mid-40s, stocky red in the face, like it had been boiled in arrogance. He parked first, dismounted, slow, his boots hitting the pavement like a dare. He didn't go inside, didn't knock on Benny's screen door. He just spotted Sam sitting there on the bench alone, quiet, dignified, and decided that would be his entertainment for the day. "Well, I'll be damned," Mallory barked, his voice sharp, smug. "Didn't know we had a museum out here on Main Street?" "Look at this relic." Sam didn't flinch. He didn't even look up at first. He just took another sip from his cup, steam curling past his cheek. "You got a problem, son?" he asked, voice even low. Mallory laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was the kind of laugh that came with backup, the kind that came to show off. "Ain't got a problem," Mallory said. "Just wondering why an old black war dog thinks he still deserves a front row seat where decent men eat." The air changed. Someone across the street stopped pushing a stroller. A pair of teenagers on bikes rolled to a slow stop. Inside the diner, the cook leaned toward the blinds. Sam set his coffee down. Gently. "I fought for this country before you were even an itch in your daddy's jeans," he said. "Don't need your permission to sit anywhere." Mallory's grin shrank half an inch. "Fought for it, huh? And what did you get out of it?" "A cane and a wooden bench." Sam finally turned his head and met his eyes. "I got enough. Now get gone." That should have been it. But men like Mallory don't walk away from pride wounds. They pick at them until they bleed. His smirk twisted into a sneer. "Talk real brave for someone one push from a nursing home," he said. Then he stepped forward faster than anyone expected. His fist cut through the air, slammed into Sam's jaw with a crack that echoed down the block. Sam fell sideways off the bench, his head smacking the curb with a dull thud. His cane clattered, his coffee spilled, and the world stood still. Gasps, a scream, but no movement. No one ran to him. Not yet. Dean stood over Sam like a man who'd just won something. Like hurting an old veteran was some kind of prize. But no one clapped. Not even his crew. In fact, a few of them looked away. Sam lay still, blood trickling from beneath his ear. His hand twitched, reaching for the cane. The crowd watched but stayed frozen, some in shock, some in shame, some in that familiar American silence that shows up too often when things go too far. And then a black SUV turned the corner. No sirens, no screeching brakes, just quiet intent. It pulled into the lot beside the diner. Dean didn't even notice. Not at first, but the people around him did. Behind that tinted windshield, a shadow moved. The driver's door opened. Out stepped Major Caleb Dorsey, Army Special Forces. 42 uniforms still dusty from red desert drills out west. Tactical boots, clean posture, broad shoulders that had carried more than combat gear. He didn't slam the door, didn't shout. He just walked with the kind of purpose that didn't need volume. He crossed the pavement in a straight line, past the stairs, past the spilled coffee. He didn't look at Mallory. Not yet. He went straight to his father. "Dad," he said, voice tight, cracking in ways no battlefield had ever managed. Sam didn't respond. He was conscious barely, his swollen face turning just enough to see the shape of his son kneeling beside him. "I'm here," Caleb said again, softer this time. "You're not alone," Dean finally noticed. "What's this?" he muttered. "You was right." Caleb looked up now, and in that moment everything changed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't ball a fist. He didn't even break stride as he stood up slowly. But there was something in that stare that made Dean Mallory, the man who had thrown a punch at an 87-year-old hero, take a small step back without meaning to. "Did you hit him?" Caleb asked. Mallory tried to sound smug, but it came out shaky. He mouthed off. "I reminded him who's in charge." Caleb didn't blink. "Touch him again, and you won't get a second reminder." That's when the second SUV arrived. Silent, unmarked. 4 men stepped out, lean, trained discipline. No weapons drawn, but none needed. Their movement was enough. They fanned out, eyes scanning, stance wide, calm but deliberate. A hush spread. Even the wind stopped. Caleb didn't need to introduce them. The town knew. And Dean. For the first time, he looked around and saw something he couldn't talk his way out of. Respect, consequence. The kind of quiet that makes cowards tremble. Caleb knelt again and examined the blood on his father's temple. A woman in floral scrubs stepped forward, offering a first aid kit she'd grabbed from the urgent care up the road. Caleb nodded, grateful. Mallory crossed his arms and leaned on his Harley, trying to act unfazed. But the mask was slipping. He wasn't the center anymore. Caleb was. Sam was. The truth was, phones were filming, eyes were watching, and the man who swung the punch he'd already lost, because the man who didn't swing back had just stood up in a way the whole town couldn't ignore. The black SUV had barely come to a stop before the air on Main Street shifted. Not just from the sudden silence or the stare Major Caleb Dorsey gave Dean Mallory, but from something deeper, something that didn't need to be spoken to be understood. The town of Ashbridge had seen many things over the years, but it had never seen a moment hold its breath quite like this. Caleb was still crouched beside his father, his gloved hands hovering above the blood trickling down Sam Dorsey's cheekbone. His fingers moved with precision, years of battlefield medicine etched into his reflexes, but there was something else in his eyes. Not panic, not rage, just purpose. And beneath it a sorrow that ran deeper than any flesh wound. "Dad," he whispered again, brushing a bit of gravel from Sam's temple. Sam stirred faintly, one eye, swelling shut the other, trying to find focus. "I'm here," Caleb said. "I've got you." Behind them, Dean Mallory folded his arms over his vest and leaned back on his Harley like he was still in control. But his eyes betrayed him. They darted to the crowd, too many phones filming, too many faces watching, without the comfort of ignorance anymore. That's when the second black SUV pulled in slower, quieter, but heavier somehow. Its government plates caught the light just enough to hush the last murmurs in the crowd. The 4 doors opened at once. 4 soldiers emerged, each dressed in tactical gear, just shy of combat earpieces in place, black boots pacing across the gravel like shadows. They didn't shout. They didn't gesture. They didn't need to. They moved with the kind of practiced unity that said, "We've been places you can't pronounce, and we came back anyway." One of them, a lean staff sergeant with close-cropped hair and sharp eyes approached Caleb. "Major," he said simply. Caleb nodded. "Secure the perimeter." They fanned out, one by the diner entrance, one near the gas station, one across the street, his eyes sweeping rooftops and alleys. The last took position beside the alley between Benny's diner and the hardware store. No weapons drawn, no force displayed, but Dean Mallory had never looked smaller. Caleb turned back to his father, who was now blinking more steadily. A woman in scrubs, breathless and flushed, stepped from the crowd and offered a small first aid kit. Caleb met her eyes, saw the fear, the compassion, and the guilt all tangled in one glance. "Thank you," he said, accepting it. She nodded and stepped back. He gently cleaned Sam's wound, each wipe careful, deliberate. The antiseptic stung, but Sam didn't flinch. He just watched his son, blood drying on his lips, pride refusing to give way to pain. "You came," Sam muttered, voice hoarse. "Always will," Caleb replied, barely above a whisper. Dean scoffed from behind them. "You as medic now," he said, trying to keep the smirk in his voice. "You gonna put a Band-Aid on that and call it a day?" Caleb stood slowly. His gaze met Dean's. He didn't speak for a moment, just stared. And something in that silence made one of Dean's younger crew members shuffle his feet and look away. "Did you hit him?" Caleb asked again. Dean tried to summon his earlier bravado. Old man started mouthing off. "Just reminded him who's in charge around here." Caleb took one step closer. "You think that makes you in charge?" "Don't see no badge on you," Dean muttered. "Just a uniform." "This uniform," Caleb said calmly, "has seen the inside of more war zones than you've seen county lines. And this old man," he nodded toward Sam, still sitting against the bench, "he's carried this country longer than you've held a job. You hit him, and you thought nobody would care." Dean's jaw worked, but no sound came. "You don't need a gun to be dangerous," Caleb continued, "but you do need courage to be a man. And what you showed today," he glanced at the bloodstain near the curb, "that wasn't courage. That was fear wearing boots too big for you." The silence stretched. Then the youngest of the bikers, barely 20 face, still smooth under the beard fuzz, reached up, unclipped his vest, folded it once, and tucked it under his arm. He walked across the street without looking back. Dean turned sharply. "Hey, where the hell are you?" But the kid didn't stop. He crossed the lot past the gas station and disappeared behind the old fire station, leaving behind whatever false strength that patch used to give him. Dean looked back, suddenly aware of how few people were still standing behind him. The rest of the gang had taken steps back unconsciously, forming a distance between themselves and the man whose fists had written a check his soul couldn't cash. Sam shifted against the bench and slowly sat up straighter. Blood crusted on his lip, one eye nearly shut. But his voice was steady when he said, "You thought you could knock me down and still walk away like a man." Dean opened his mouth, closed it. "I've bled in jungles you couldn't point to on a map," Sam continued, "for a country that hasn't always loved me back. I've buried brothers in flag-covered boxes. I've stood where mortars fell and didn't blink. And you think today, you won something?" His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "The only thing you won," he said, "was a shame you'll carry in your bones long after the bruises on my face are gone." One of the Special Forces soldiers, standing by the entrance, Private Harlan, murmured to Caleb without looking away from the crowd. "Local PD says they're 5 minutes out." Caleb nodded. He turned to his father again. "Paramedics will be here soon." Sam smirked, winced. "Don't let them cut my pants. These are my good ones." Caleb chuckled once, low and full of something sharp. "I'll handle it." Dean, still fuming, tried one last push. "I didn't mean to put him down like that. Just got heated. You know how it is?" Sam raised a hand slowly, palm up. "Don't you dare insult me with that." Dean flinched. Sam's hand dropped. "You meant to hit me. You meant to make a statement." "And you did. Problem is the statement said more about you than it ever said about me." Caleb turned to the crowd, his voice loud enough for them to hear, but still calm. "Ashbridge, look around. This is who we are when no one steps in. When silence gets louder than courage." The bystanders didn't cheer. They didn't clap, but something shifted. A mother near the lamppost whispered something to her son. A man at the gas station put his phone away and bowed his head. The town was listening now, not to anger, but to the quiet weight of truth. Sam leaned back again, eyes closing for a moment. His hand found his cane. You already won, Caleb told him, kneeling again. And you didn't have to throw a single punch. From down the road, the sirens began to hum, distant, unhurried. Not a rescue, just a response. Because the real rescue had already begun. It started the moment Caleb stepped out of that SUV and showed Ashbridge what it looks like when dignity stands taller than violence, when presence carries more force than fists, and when a town finally starts to wake up not with noise, but with the silence that speaks louder than anything else. The sirens had long faded, and the last of the crowd had dispersed by the time the sun began to dip behind the storefronts of Ashbridge. What remained was the memory of blood-stained curbs, scuffed gravel near the bench, and a silence that hadn't quite gone back to normal. For years, folks in that town had walked past Sam Dorsey like a monument respected, yes, but unnoticed in the way routine things often are. But not anymore. Not after yesterday. Not after they'd seen him fall and watched his son stand beside him without a single weapon drawn, and yet somehow shift the weight of the entire town with just his presence. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp air that hinted at the edge of fall. Church bells rang faintly from across town, a boy tossed a newspaper onto porches from a rusted bike, and the windows at Benny's diner fogged with the smell of bacon grease and scrambled eggs. But outside, right on schedule, on that same bench where blood had dried just hours ago, sat Sam Dorsey. His lip was swollen. A butterfly bandage stretched across the side of his cheek. One hand rested on his cane. The other cradled a fresh cup of black coffee. He wore the same windbreaker, same pressed slacks, and the same army cap that had sat on his head through more history than most folks ever read about. There was no announcement, no fanfare, just presence. A quiet reclaiming of the space that violence had tried to stain. A little boy, maybe 7, holding his mother's hand, slowed as they passed. His eyes locked on Sam, wide and uncertain. The mother hesitated. Then she gently nudged the boy forward. "Go on," she whispered. The boy swallowed, looked up, and said, "Thank you for your service, sir." Sam blinked slowly and gave him a small nod. "You're welcome, young man." Across the street, Caleb stood leaning against the hardware store's wall, arms folded, watching. He hadn't planned on coming back that morning, but something about seeing his father sitting there again, the exact same spot, same posture, same stubborn grace, made staying away feel wrong. He crossed slowly, boots crunching the gravel. Sam looked up just as he reached the bench. "Didn't think you'd be back so soon," Sam muttered. Caleb shrugged. Didn't feel right to be anywhere else. For a while they said nothing. Just watched the quiet rhythm of Ashbridge move around them. Cars humming past, someone walking a dog, the world pretending nothing had shifted even though everything had. Then the sheriff's cruiser turned the corner and parked by the curb. Out stepped Sheriff Elliot Rawlins, hat in hand. No backup, no fanfare. Just a man who looked like he hadn't slept much. He approached slow, respectfully. "Morning, Sam." "Major." Sam tipped his cup slightly. Caleb gave a nod. Rawlins cleared his throat. "Just came from Dean Mallory's house." Caleb's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Rawlins continued. "He's agreed to make a public apology. Town Square, 3 days from now." Sam raised an eyebrow. "Voluntary didn't take much convincing," Rawlins said. I think he saw himself on one of those phone videos. Didn't like the man looking back at him." Sam took a long sip of coffee. "People change when they're embarrassed," he said. "Doesn't mean they grow." Rawlins didn't argue. He just nodded, hat still in hand. "Figured you had a right to know." "We'll be there," Caleb said. That was all Rawlins needed. He tipped his hat and walked back to his cruiser. As the engine pulled away, the wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves along the sidewalk. A small bundle of flowers had been left beside the bench. No card, no name. Just lay gently on the concrete where the blood had been. Sam noticed it but didn't comment. Instead, he asked quietly, "You know what hurts the most?" Caleb looked over. "Not the punch," Sam said. "It's how long I sat here thinking maybe this town had changed enough that I didn't have to be on guard anymore." Caleb exhaled through his nose slowly. "Maybe it hasn't," he said, "but maybe now it will." Sam turned to him, the swollen side of his face twitching slightly with the effort. "Then let's hold it to that." From down the block, the doors of Benny's diner opened and closed, conversations murmured back to life. But there was a slowness to it all now, a hesitation like people were thinking before they spoke, looking before they looked away. Across the way, a man who'd been filming the day before stood at the corner with his phone tucked into his jacket pocket. This time he wasn't filming, just watching, thinking, maybe regretting, maybe remembering. "The sheriff say what time that apology's supposed to be?" Sam asked. "Noon," Caleb said. "Same time you always sit here." Good, Sam nodded. "Let him see what dignity looks like up close." Caleb smiled faintly. "You ready to make this town remember?" Sam chuckled a dry crack sound. "I ain't here to make them remember me," he said. "I'm here to make sure they don't forget themselves." Caleb stood. "I'll be back around lunch." Sam nodded. "Tuna melt, extra pickles." Of course. They shared a look one forged in blood and battles and Sunday mornings like this. One that didn't need to say anything else. As Caleb walked back toward the hardware store, more people passed the bench. Some nodded. Some paused. None looked away. That was new. That mattered. That meant something. Later that afternoon, back at the hospital, one of the nurses asked Sam if he wanted to rest. He said no. Said he needed to sit up straight a while longer. Something about a bench, he murmured. But what he didn't say was this, that sometimes a man doesn't fight back because his strength is in not needing to. That silence, when chosen, can be louder than any roar. And that legacy isn't built in medals or wars. It's built in the spaces we claim, the truths we carry, and the moments we refuse to shrink from. In the days that followed, the footage spread. Not with fury, not with fire, but with quiet force. A man sitting up, bruised and bloodied, but unbroken. A son standing beside him, calm and composed. And a town forced to ask itself what it stood for. The apology came. Not grand, not weepy, but honest enough. And when Dean Mallory stepped onto the steps of the courthouse to face the people he'd let down, Sam Dorsey was there. On his feet. Cap on. Cane planted. Watching. Forgiveness. Maybe. But more importantly, accountability. And when it was over and the town began to drift back to normal, something lingered. Not just in the videos or the headlines, but in the way people moved, slower, more aware. Because some moments don't fade, they echo. And on the corner of Main and Wilson, outside Benny's Diner, there sat a bench. A bench no one questioned anymore. A bench no one walked past without understanding what had happened there. A bench that didn't belong to Sam Dorsey, but to everything he stood for. Quiet, steady, unshaken, and never ever alone. In a quiet town like Ashbridge, where the rhythm of life often goes unchanged for years, one moment of cruelty and silence revealed a truth we too often overlook. It's not just the violence that wounds us, it's the silence that lets it happen. What happened to Samuel Dorsey on that bench outside Benny's Diner wasn't just a personal attack, it was a mirror held up to the town, and to all of us. It asked a hard question. When injustice happens in broad daylight, will we freeze, or will we speak? Sam, an 87-year-old veteran who had already paid his dues through war sacrifice and quiet dignity, was struck not just by a fist, but by years of assumptions, buried prejudice, and unchecked ego. And yet he did not retaliate. His strength wasn't in fighting back, it was in standing back up, returning to the same bench the very next morning, and looking his town in the eye. That is courage. That is legacy. His son, Major Caleb Dorsey, didn't come with sirens or anger. He didn't need to throw a punch. He stood tall, used his voice, and reminded everyone that real power doesn't always speak loudly, it acts with purpose. His calm presence shattered the illusion that force and rage define strength. Instead, it reminded people that dignity, honor, and quiet conviction are far more lasting. So what's the lesson here? We must not remain silent in the face of wrong. It's not enough to be quietly uncomfortable, we must be actively just. Sometimes that means standing up for someone. Sometimes it means stepping forward when others shrink back. And sometimes it simply means refusing to look away. And to the younger generation watching from the sidelines, holding their phones and their breath, remember this: what you choose to do in the quiet moments matters just as much as what you film. Your voice, your presence, and your choices help shape the kind of world we all live in. To our audience here at US Instructive Stories, thank you for being part of this journey. We tell these stories not just to move you, but to wake something up inside you, a reminder that character still matters, that dignity still wins, and that silence can be broken by even a single act of courage. If this story stirred something in your heart, share it. Talk about it. Let it remind you that we all have a bench we must return to, a stand we must take, and a truth we must defend. Thank you for listening. Thank you for feeling. And most of all, thank you for not looking away.